Hey everyone, and welcome to the show today. It's Monday, and so what I want to do is I want to give you something that hopefully you're not going to get anywhere else on any other podcast. I'm going to give you something that will give you a glimpse into the future of how we're going to invest. And we cover a lot of stuff on this podcast, and you're very, very flexible, by the way. Thank you for listening into some of these topics. I go pretty far and wide and left and right and up and down and cover a whole bunch of stuff. It's not really clear, maybe, I don't know, from your end where I'm going, but in my end, it is quite clear, or it's becoming more clear. I'm basically trying to get myself into the future as much as possible so I can understand what it really means to be investing for this new world. And it's easier probably now than it has been for a long time, understanding what this new world will look like based on some of the changes happening in the world, but also just some of the technology that we're now starting to fully appreciate. So as we go into this one today, I'd love you, if you're just trying to figure out what this episode is about before you decide to listen in or not, I'd love you really just to stick with it and try to understand it, even though the topic is kind of in the neighborhood of crypto. You don't have to be into crypto to actually get a lot out of this episode, because really it's about custody. We're talking about how we can create a multi-sig wallet, which will help protect us, or specifically help protect our assets that we're investing in. Now, those assets might not just be digital assets. They could be things like your social media accounts, or it could be your brand reputation. It could be positive feedbacks. It could be Google reviews, your NPS score. I don't know. It could be your house, though. It could be your income. It could be your own digital identity. Things are probably going to move in this direction. And so it's more important than ever to understand what some of the new solutions will be when our investments start qualitatively changing in terms of how they actually reside in themselves. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you. But I'll explain to you who Paul is. So I've written some notes on this, and this will make a lot more sense. So Paul Salisbury, who is he? He's a visionary technologist. He's an investor on a mission to explore the cutting edge of technology alongside fast-thinking, curious individuals. Sound good? Now, he is the founder of Everlasting. What does Everlasting do? Well, they provide custodial solutions for investors who want to directly hold their assets while having reliable backups in place. In effect, today, I guess we're teaching you not only how to be your own bank, but to be your own custodian. Now, custody is often an overlooked aspect of investing, but I feel it really warrants a closer look. Whether it's an online investment platform, which you use to invest in individual shares, stake, Sharesies, international brokers, Hatch, or it's a KiwiSaver provider or another fund manager investing on your behalf, someone has to safeguard your cash and your investments, and ideally it's going to be separate from the platform that you're dealing with. So custodians hold assets on our behalf to minimize the risk of theft or loss, and also to facilitate more innovative investment solutions. The whole idea, though, here is that investors are being offered an additional layer of protection and often oversight as well. So the use of custodians are often mandated, and it's there because it can keep us safe. You don't want to be investing in your KiwiSaver provider, for example. You want to be investing through them, and custodians allow that to happen. But the main concern I feel with current custodians, and it's not really a risk, but it's not even really a concern, it's more of a question really, is that I just wonder how they're going to cope with a lot of the upcoming changes coming down the pike. Like, for example, one day, our homes, our incomes, our currencies, our investments, both traditional and digital, will, like I say, probably reside in blockchain-powered custodial solutions. And that is going to be disruptive, to put it mildly, to traditional custodians. So today, Paul is going to be talking about how everyday investors can not only become their own bank, but also their own custodian. So as the co-founder of Blockchain Labs New Zealand since October 2016, as the founder of Everlasting Group since May 2021, Paul is knowledgeable, super knowledgeable, and he's adept at actually explaining these somewhat complex concepts. So you're going to learn a lot today. This episode is not only a must listen for crypto enthusiasts, but also for those intrigued by the future of finance. So, hey, before we start, I'd like to tell you about something new for those who may be enrolled in the New Wealth Foundation's personal finance course. Every Wednesday, 12:45 for all of May and June, we're hosting free webinars. And in these webinars, it's not hugely long, but we're going to be covering the different elements of the course bit by bit and discuss some new content as well, but also get some feedback from you, because that's kind of what we want to do, is make this as best as we can and improve it as time goes on. So we're doing that for free right now for all of May and June to reward those that have enrolled in New Wealth Foundations. Now, for those that haven't enrolled yet, if it's of interest, use the offer code WEBINAR to get a massive discount now for all of May and June. Check out the show notes for details around New Wealth Foundations now, and don't forget that offer code WEBINAR for a big discount. All right, are you ready to start though? Let's dive in.
Thanks for listening into the Everyday Investor Podcast. Like what you've heard, but you want more? Make sure that you've subscribed to our YouTube channel and subscribe to the Everyday Investor newsletter too. The links for everything are found in the show notes that you can access easily by swiping or tapping over the cover art in your podcast player. If you received value in some way, I'd love it if you could take the time to write a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Share it with a friend, or think of our show partners where appropriate. Easy Crypto, the safe and easy way to buy and sell crypto in New Zealand. Gorilla Technology, increasing business success through innovative and strategic IT solutions. And Gero & Co. Financial advice for everyday people building everyday wealth. Remember, some investments or strategies discussed on these episodes may result in financial loss. Be sure to do your own research and ideally seek qualified advice of your own before making investment decisions. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll catch you next time around. Views on CBDCs, bullish or bearish for crypto in general?
Yeah, I like private forms of money, right? I do think that is where money came from. It was mostly bank issued before it became government issued. And I do think we're going to just keep seeing more innovations. What we've got currently, where it's kind of like there's stable coins that are either algorithmically or privately issued. And then we've got government issued, CBDC type stable forms of money on chain. I don't think it's one or the other. I think there'll be a lot more innovation and interoperability where it might be still led by banks or non-banks or technology companies, and just overall with the blessing of the various governments which control the broader money supply in their economy.
So I guess the CBDC use case from their perspective, strategically anyway, thinking about the US trying to keep everything in their sphere of influence, they would probably want stable coins to be interoperable between CBDCs. Would that be true?
Yes. Yeah, I
because
think
it brings the traffic home, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And as much as there is a lot of controls on networks like SWIFT or bank transfers and wire transfers, I think the cat's already out of the bag in terms of it's not the network that the value is transferred on. It's that you control it. You need to control it some other way, and therefore actually endorsing and embracing stablecoins and CBDCs is the way to have the future control rather than lose control of things.
So what does this look like in the future then?
So in the future, we do see not necessarily a broader adoption of speculating on the volatile crypto assets like your Bitcoin and your Ethereum. I think it will actually just be people do have some portion of their wealth that's in a stable asset like a stable coin or a CBDC, and that itself also needs to be secured, right? It's not like you're going to get a stable coin and then deposit it with your bank. You're going to self-custody those assets, and that's where we see the growth of the industry is this kind of class of other assets that aren't necessarily crypto native, but people do have in their wallet.
Right. So as we go more digital in terms of our value, and as every day people have more of a portion of digital assets of some sort, including stable coins, we have to store it anywhere. It's like holding physical cash. Yep, just pop it in your wallet, stick it in your pocket. not
Hope your
that
kids
easy with
don't
digital.
pilfer it from your pockets. Yeah,
Exactly. Not that simple in the digital realm, right? And that's
it's
why
not.
it's important that we think about things like custody, right?
Yeah, it all comes back to
Okay.
custody, and it comes back to actually having the right tools to custody it
Yeah.
as individuals.
Okay. Cool. So under the banner of user experience, lack of understanding, custody sits there. So in terms of like crypto 101 for those that are listening that maybe don't really understand or care about crypto yet or digital assets, can you talk to me about how we custody digital assets?
Yeah, and I'd even extend your point there that it's not necessarily people who haven't yet got into crypto. Even some people who haven't understood some of these fundamental points.
Good point.
So they'll have gone through the steps, or some tech savvy friend will have helped them,
Mm,
but they might not have actually fully understood what they've done and what their situation is today. So
right.
even people who have crypto come to me and ask, hey, so what is a seed phrase? Why did I write that down? Right? And it's like, that's a really important piece of understanding that is unapproachable to most people who aren't really tech savvy.
Right.
So,
So a lot of people that did get on board, including myself, say in the
hmm,
last 5 years, it's been about get things set up, start dollar cost averaging in over time or whatever your strategy is. But little regard has been given by the majority of those people, even around how to keep things safe. Would that be true?
Absolutely. And also, we've got a few key things that we, as an industry, keep telling people of, okay, that seed phrase or that um, private key that was generated in your wallet, write it down, keep that in a safe place, because it is, important to ever recover your funds. We focus on if you're still alive, you're going to want to recover those funds if you've lost your laptop or your
Okay.
phone or something like that.
Okay, let's break that down though really quickly. So we've
Yeah.
got, say, for example, a hot wallet, which will be an application on your phone or your computer. Cold wallet, little dumb USB thing that you can unplug and it's not connected to the internet. But when you say things like seed phrase, can you break that down as to how that works from a cryptography perspective, perhaps?
Yeah. So, and also it is a form of cold wallet, right?
Sure.
In that you've written down those words. So a seed phrase is generally 12 or 24 words.
Hmm.
And when we talk about generating a crypto wallet, regardless of whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any crypto wallet, it starts with some random inputs into the algorithm, right? And just think of an algorithm as a series of mathematical steps that if you follow each of those steps in the order, you'll always get the same end result. And so the input is what actually is key to that.
Hmm.
That's why we call it a private key or a seed phrase,
Hmm.
being the 12 or 24 words that you put in at the start. And any system that gets the same input will produce the same output, which is a wallet which is able to spend and control the assets at that
I
address.
see. So it's called seed phrase because that really is the seed.
Yes, that is the origin of the name.
Mm.
Sometimes it's called a secret recovery phrase. We haven't done a good job at
Mm.
actually standardizing that, but that is one of the more common terms. But then people don't understand, how's my seed phrase different to my private key? Well, private key is still another name for, or a seed phrase is a type of private key. Instead of it being a purely random series of letters and numbers,
Mm.
um, we've put it into a word format in terms of those individual words,
Mm.
because that might be easier for people to enter into a new system and type in on a keyboard and some of those things.
So there's a private key, which is a long string of numbers and letters, and then there's 12 or 24 word seed phrase. But these are pretty much the exact same thing.
Yeah, they're different representations of exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And the seed phrase has become the common, denominator there of, if you're setting up a new phone, what you're going to take from your old one and put into the new one is the 12 or 24 word seed phrase.
Yes. Okay. So if we think about normal finance, traditional finance, where we have New Zealand dollars or US dollars, Australian dollars, and we're putting it into a market in exchange for some units in an investment of some type, we know that we can go in one direction and then we can sell the units in that investment and go the other direction and produce that cash back out. That's kind of like you go through an exchange process, and that's kind of how we invest. But we're really just thinking about our dollars as money that we probably take for granted as dollars representations that we can log in and we can see those dollar representations in the bank account and we can move them around. we're just moving around information on somebody else's database, but
Yeah.
we can do that. When it comes to being your own bank, what is it about being your own bank that we just don't get yet? Because it is quite different. It's not like we're investing traditionally. When we hold digital assets, we're holding an alternative medium of exchange as well. And that comes with some extra baggage. But talk to me about how we need to think about that a little bit differently, if you can.
Yeah, there's often quite a lot of excitement about being your own bank. You're like, yeah, cut out the middleman, cool. I'll have the ability 24/7
Yeah.
to do those other forms of exchange, right? A blockchain doesn't have bank holidays. It keeps on running, and the systems that are built on top of blockchains are running every second of every day. So that's the exciting side. The more challenging side of being your own bank is, what if I sign a transaction that I shouldn't have? There's nobody that's going to check over that for me and make sure it was safe before I sent it.
When you say sign a transaction, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the primary source of every transaction on a blockchain is from your individual key. So if you've generated a wallet, you are 100% responsible for your keys in that wallet.
Right.
And so, in order to make an exchange or even just move assets around between accounts, you're signing it. And one of the interesting ways to think about this, if we think of the internet, where you might be logging into a website and you're looking out for that little padlock as you sign into your online banking, right? That's your browser negotiating with the bank's server, that's hosting their website and saying, great, this is a secure channel that's been opened up now. And then they trust whatever you type in. And if you are making a bank transfer, it's not actually, it's encrypted in terms of the communication, but it's not actually verifying you are who you say you are, other than your password that you entered in at the start. On a blockchain, they're actually going, okay, instead of trying to secure the channel of communication, let's actually secure every single message. So every transaction is being cryptographically signed as being not just valid, but also coming from your key, from your wallet, which you're responsible for.
That's a good way of looking at it. So instead of just making sure that channel is secure, it's the actual movement across the channel which is secured.
Correct.
Okay. That's a different way of looking at it. I've never really appreciated that before.
Yeah, and that's where it starts, some of the unraveling a little bit of the excitement of be your own bank, is now you think about, well, your bank had a security team to make sure that their servers were, nice and secure from any attackers, right? Do you have the same on your home laptop? Probably not. And it starts to get harder and harder the more that you go down that path. It's not to say it's insurmountable, but it is still oriented towards tech-savvy people.
Well, that's probably, I guess, one of the reasons why there hasn't been wide-scale adoption by everyday people yet, is because it just feels too difficult to do that. And even those that have gotten into it, like myself included, would be in this category, where I thought I was doing a really good job of practicing seed phrase security and diversifying across multiple wallets. And I'm pretty proud that it's probably better than most still, but there's always more improvement. And we'll get to that in a second as to what that could look like. But do you think that most people that have gotten involved with crypto probably don't yet appreciate the significance of what we're talking about here? Because to be your own bank, to actually be confident that you can sign these transactions, well, you actually really have to honestly do an assessment of yourself. Like, how secure is this really? If I passed away, if I was incapacitated, if somebody had a gun to my head, how secure really are these assets? We kind of all pretty much fall down there to some degree, don't we?
Yeah, we're still human, right? And there's still even just human error, right? And it doesn't matter how long you've been in crypto. There are some people that have been in it for a decade and put the wrong value or just done something wrong, and it's gone.
Yeah. And once it's gone, there's no 0800 number. There's no call center now.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So surely you probably would have, and we'll get into who Everlasting is in a second, because that really is the ultimate solution from what I can understand here, or something like that would be the ultimate solution to address the custody concerns that everyday crypto investors probably have. But what would be some of the more, I guess, innovative yet common things that you've come across around how people have stored their seed phrases? Like, have you seen people tattoo them on their kids and stuff like that?
Yeah. Hopefully no tattoos, because you
Yeah.
want to actually change your seed phrase from time to time and
More
move
so
the
than you change your
assets.
kids. Yeah,
Yes.
ideally.
And yeah, there have been some really interesting innovations. You can get a titanium plate or different devices which you can then etch your seed
Mhm.
phrase into. Some of those actually go into multiple parts, and so you can store it, perhaps bury it somewhere.
Bury
So
in the garden next to your gold.
yeah. And yeah, so people have tried to split it apart and to store it in separate places, but there's not something that's incredibly repeatable, right?
Mm.
And in some of those cases, what's in that person's will is, yeah, these are the geolocation coordinates somebody needs to go dig up, right? And that not necessarily what are the assets that are buried there, and
Mhm.
what to actually do with them.
Mm.
So it can be quite cryptic. There's also people who thought, all right, a safe place would be on the back of a nice artwork in my living room, right? Nobody's going to take it off the wall and have a look there. But what if there's an art thief that's targeting you, not somebody coming for your crypto, and they actually take the artwork and then realize, hey, there's payday on the back as well. So,
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of clever ideas, but not all of them pan out.
And sometimes when you think you're being clever, you're not really. Like, for example, maybe you're setting up your crypto wallet and you're copying down the seed phrase, yet you then take a digital photo of that and you store it in iCloud. Tell me
Yeah.
why that's a little bit silly.
Yeah, and there are an astonishing number of cases of that where it's a cloud backup system. Even sometimes OneDrive, if you're on Windows, might be backing up your downloads folder, and you thought you were just downloading something for a few minutes, but it actually kept a copy for that whole time. And so,
Mm.
because your backup systems like iCloud or Dropbox are actually linked just to a username and password and may not be the most secure password, those systems are getting infiltrated all the time, and then the attackers are running analysis over all your files, even if it's in a photo of your seed phrase. With the AI, it can do the recognition of those characters and then send that off to somebody, and that's enough for them to
Mm.
put the same seed phrase into their wallet software. And then, as far as the blockchain network's concerned, they are you. They are the controller of that address, and they can
Mm.
transfer all those assets away.
Because he who has the keys has the gold.
Yes.
And if we were just to think about the future, and you mentioned AI before, it's actually not that hard to imagine that even if the data was really like, maybe there was several photos of little pieces of your passphrase, or you wrote it down into a story and the story was a little bit weird, like you can't really outsmart AI of the future. Therefore, really the only solution is what? Just to write it down by hand or etch it into something or whatever. But you don't really want to put that somewhere where there could be a digital copy. Like, even in front of a camera, you would never do it, would you?
Just we need to get away from the almost like it's a bad security practice to have one seed phrase that exists for a long period of time, because every month that goes by, there's a probability that something has happened, whether it's a compromise of your laptop or some malware, or a camera has observed something while you're on your phone, perhaps on the bus. You just don't know where your compromise might have sourced from, but eventually it catches up. There's been enough compromises of your key in some way that you should actually just be replacing keys all the time.
Sure. So you've written it on the back of a piece of artwork, but you don't know if the cleaner took it down in the last 10 years and maybe copied it down.
Yeah,
So really the clock starts every time you set up a brand new wallet, right? And that's
correct.
kind of part of maybe good seed phrase management, is to replace things every so often, right?
Yeah, and in fact, in the early days of Bitcoin, before we had seed phrases, one of the most common practices, so kind of around 2012, was every time you spent any Bitcoin from your wallet, move all of the remainder of your Bitcoin to a new Bitcoin address, right? That was the common practice.
Like washing your hands.
Yeah. And making sure that if there was any vulnerability, or you'd actually, signed something or left a signature as a piece of evidence for some future technology to decrypt, well, they could only decrypt what was in the past, not your future one. And so you would keep moving it forward. That was too onerous for even the most advocate Bitcoiners, right? And so that practice fell to the side. But and we don't necessarily need to do it on every transaction, but at least think more than once a year
Okay.
you should be
Changing up
rotating
your
to a new
addresses.
key. Yeah.
That's a really good tip, actually, just right there. I think you think you've got it, and then 20 years in the future, you don't actually have jack because you were a bit sloppy back in 2024.
Yeah, there's actually an active exploit at the moment, which has been running for about 4 months, affected less than 100 wallets so far.
Yeah.
But we've been doing some of the research and analysis along with the international kind of security community on what might be the common attack vector. And it's still not clear what the common vector is, just that all of these wallets are more than 4 years old.
Really?
So something that people did back in 2018, 2019 is now losing them, in some cases, millions of dollars today.
And no one knows really what that thing is. But really, what you're saying is the only solution for that would really be to rotate out of old addresses.
Yeah, on a regular basis. So, it's just another reminder of, okay, we can't be complacent. Even if it's a hardware wallet where you're like, great, I've never, taken that seed phrase off, you just don't know at what point you might have connected it to a malicious site or signed something that you shouldn't have signed.
Yeah.
Trying not to scare people, but at the same time, it's like, be aware of these things as factors when deciding how to custody your crypto.
Yeah. And people listening might be kind of thinking, well, I'm not into crypto, so this doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would say to that is that you might not be into it now, and it might seem fringe, and even just hearing people talk as if it's real or it will be real in the future, well, that sounds ridiculous. But in your view, is this just a weird fringe thing that some people invest in, or are we really talking the way of the future here when we're talking crypto?
It's interesting because if I look back 10 years ago, if you asked, me as a 30-year-old, hey, how many New Zealanders, what percentage of the population will get into this crypto thing? I would have said, yeah, it's going to stay fringe for more than a decade. Maybe 20, 30 years from now, it'll be an everyday thing. But here we are 10 years in, and it's like 1 in 10 Kiwi adults have some crypto, and you just go, wait, it can't be, but
1 in 10.
Yeah, Inland Revenue puts it at just over 500,000 New Zealand residents. So, yeah, and in other countries, that can be 1 in 8, let's say in Australia, and closer to 1 in 5 in the US. So it's really got a bigger adoption than I would have thought it would at this stage of its evolution, right?
When did you feel like crypto was not just this weird thing on the side, but when did you feel like it was potentially the way of the future with finance?
Yeah, that was interesting. It did take me about 2.5 kind of years there.
Right.
And it did seem like just some magical internet money. But the more that you used it and the more that it was just reliable and it kept working. So, yeah, I don't think there's ever that one point where it's like not real, but as you experience it and use it and it keeps functioning, it's almost like this human confidence that you have, like you would have had early on the internet or with email.
Sure.
You might have back in the 90s emailed someone and then phoned them to be like, did you get my email?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, good, great.
Yeah.
But after a while, you're not going to be, you'd sound like an idiot to phone somebody today to be like, did you receive my email? Or you might be quite pushy. You don't need to check that somebody received an email.
Because you know that the technology probably works now.
Yeah.
By now you should know that.
And also in the case of email, it was about 10 years between its invention and early use. And the court's actually saying, hey, yeah, now having served notice to somebody in a legal sense or to be able to produce evidence, it didn't have to be a written letter that you sent somebody as evidence in court. They said, well, no, it's actually enough to show that you have sent an email because the probability that they received that email is we're confident enough that it didn't go to somebody else or the wrong person. And they can't say, oh, no, I didn't see that.
That's right. So you saw that earlier on than most.
Yeah.
When did you first get into crypto in general?
Yeah, so I'd first come across Bitcoin in 2011 when I was living in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And at the time, it seemed like it was very isolated in Germany.
Yeah.
I think part of it was maybe the Google kind of bubble there of, as I'm Googling it, I'm getting mostly German results back. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting, but it's, not something that's necessarily I'm going to jump into. It was actually after moving back to New Zealand in 2012 that people here were talking about it. And I'm like, oh, wait, wasn't that a German thing? Why would we be talking about it here?
Maybe
And
there's something in this, right?
yeah, maybe there's something in it. Dug in a bit further, read the white paper a second time, and then it made sense of, okay, this is going to. And also, I'd worked a lot in banking and different, so I understood how networks like Swift and things worked. Even though I was on the technology side of that, my curiosity was like, okay, this could be another form. This could follow a similar path to a protocol like email becoming
Okay.
ubiquitous. So
So
I could.
you had a background that helped you. Like that didn't stop you though, did it? Your understanding of the Swift network and traditional finance plumbing, that didn't stop you by the sounds of it. That actually caused you to understand it even more.
Yes, in my case, and I guess my curiosity, I kept finding those analogs where they were the same and where they were different, and being able to rationalize. Okay, is that being different a good thing or a bad thing?
Because I think a lot of people, even today, that are in traditional finance, that should, in theory, have a pretty good understanding of how the plumbing works, you'd think, are quite dismissive still, or fearful, effectively, is what it means around crypto in general. But I think the difference with you is that maybe you weren't feeling threatened for some reason, or your curiosity overpowered you.
Yeah, I think there is an element of the curiosity really driving it. Also, the fact that it wasn't seen as an investment back then, like you didn't expect it to be worth a lot of money. And, early purchases, I bought some coffee beans from Indonesia, right? And it was just like, oh, if I was to actually try to, so a coffee grow in Indonesia isn't going to have like a credit card payment checkout on the website, right? And all of those different things that normally wouldn't have been accessible to them was suddenly accessible through Bitcoin. I could make that payment and they'd send me the coffee beans. And there were also some charities that were set up around taking donations of Bitcoin and then buying medication and things for people in Sierra Leone. And it was just like, great, that's so much easier to make this direct transfer. And so, yeah, definitely some of those early experiences when it wasn't worth a lot of money meant I could get that confidence before it had value.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is actually watching it evolve. So when I talked earlier about how before seed phrases were a thing, we treated wallets and private keys kind of differently.
Yeah.
Seeing, especially between 2012 and 2015, the actual standards, the software, the processes, everything evolve from what was so much more primitive to what it is today, also gave me the confidence as a technologist to be able to say, okay, I can be an expert in this and I can build businesses around this that help people to secure their money.
So there was CZ or, oh man, what does that stand for?
Xiaoping Zen.
Oh, thank you, man. You're much better at that than me. CEO of Binance. He came out recently. I think it was in a tweet, wasn't it?
Yeah, actually, it was also a podcast interview that the tweet kind of took the snippet from.
Yeah.
And so in that, he was saying that one of the largest unsolved problems in crypto, well, the interviewer was asking for what is the largest unsolved problem, and he said custody. And that seems strange coming from the CEO of one of the largest custodians of crypto, as a large exchange with a lot of assets stored on there.
Kind of ironic.
But what he was talking to, and he clarified as they dug into that, is self-custody is still only okay while somebody is alive, right? And passing on assets, or how we think about wallets today, isn't where it needs to be, even for while somebody's alive, but especially after somebody passes away.
Got it. So let's paint a scene here where there's a family, a couple of kids, and one of the adults in this family unit holds some crypto assets. They basically, unfortunately, tragically, they pass away. They had their seed phrase carefully written on a bit of paper, glued to underneath their desk or something like that, or behind the
Yep.
TV or behind the artwork. And they knew where it was. They may have even told their partner where it was, but that doesn't necessarily mean much, because following the death of a spouse, you might not necessarily make rational decisions. It's quite likely that you could lose it or forget, right?
Yeah. Or there might be other family members that are also grieving who might come spend time at that household as well. And it only takes one of them to also find the seed phrase. Um, or in that time of grief, your loved one, say your wife, to completely forget about it, even though you tried to stress the importance of that piece of paper that's in
Yes.
that special place, they can blank things out.
Yes.
And also, you forget that what we're talking about of the confidence of actually using crypto and it becoming more and more real as you use it, riding a bicycle,
Yeah.
your spouse hasn't had that experience. For some, it's still not real yet. And for some, it's might be real-ish, but they haven't actually got the confidence to follow your instructions. So then who do they go to
Mm.
and say, hey, I've got, this piece of paper that I know is really important, and I've been told that there's these assets in there, but can you help me? Right.
That's right.
And I've been a recipient of those scenarios because I ran Blockchain Labs, which was a smart contract audit company, and kind of known in New Zealand in the security side of things. So even though it wasn't a service we offered, I'd get approached by people saying, could you help us to access and follow these instructions, because we don't know what we're doing.
Sure. These potentially could be executors of estates.
Yeah, in some
Right.
cases, it's actually been a legal professional that is named as an executor. In other cases, it's the brother or the cousin or the friend.
Yes.
And even they themselves, while they might be technically savvy, they don't exactly know what to do. And they
Sure.
want to make sure that they're not messing it up.
Of course, because they're already over their heads. They probably agreed, yeah, I'll take care of your estate. And then they see this 12 or 24 word seed phrase. And it's like, uh-oh, what happens if I stuff this up, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot of assets that are potentially at risk, eh? When you think about
it
this.
starts to get bigger. And when you first put your backup and those instructions, it probably wasn't worth that much money.
That's right.
But you didn't go back and update that or think about what's a better way to handle it.
Yeah.
Then it's worth a lot more money.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's even more stressful for those involved after you've passed away.
Exactly.
And
it's like anything, right? It's like you probably wrote down your password somewhere when you first set up your internet banking, but if you don't revisit it and change it, you're never going to look at it. You'll just always assume. And then one day you're dead.
yeah, and it's even worse than that because people are always meaning to update it, right? And because it's not just one seed phrase, you might actually have multiple wallets that you've generated, and there's a new one that you've created in last year because you were doing a lot more trading and you found this new protocol that you were going into. You actually put a significant amount into that, and you were always thinking, oh yeah, right, I should update my instructions for my wife, but I'm not going to die tomorrow, so it'll be fine, right? Sadly, some of those cases where people have come asking for help, we were able to recover only a small portion of the total net worth of those individuals because those instructions were 2, 3, 4 years old. And there were new wallets and new seed phrases that had other portions of those assets as people had diversified and spread them into other wallets. So
exactly, yeah.
It's really just human nature, really, that you always downplay the risk of things getting out of date.
Okay. But the current solutions to this custody risk, one of them that I often will talk about will be the Bitcoin three-way. Have some exposure in managed funds or KiwiSaver, hot wallet, a cold wallet, divide it up a little bit, right? It kind of helps, but it kind of just makes the problem worse as well if you're still practicing the same seed phrase security protocols on all of those wallets. But you also have like using you mentioned Binance before, like you could use an exchange and then you don't have any custodial risk. Well, you do actually. It's just different.
Yeah. So you don't have your failure to custody the assets. You've then got exposure to the failure of that custodian. and what happens either if they go into liquidation, like we saw with FTX.
That'll never happen, though. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those nice theoreticals, like
Yeah.
what is more likely to outlive you, the exchange that you've currently been buying and selling your crypto on, or your hardware wallet, right? Your hardware wallet is more likely to outlive you than a crypto exchange. But at the same time, there's trade-offs between the two. So today, still a lot of people do store the majority of their crypto on an exchange, despite repeated, like advice. And it's because they're afraid of the self-custody alternative. They feel it's more likely they will make a mistake and then suffer the consequences of it than for the exchange to go out of business. But exchanges go out of business all the time. Even banks recently are going out of business. And so relying on those centralized custodians isn't the answer either.
So we need a solution in between our own custody and third-party custody providers, right?
Yeah, and ideally you can do that using the technology that is already there, right? And so this is one of the interesting things people maybe are less aware of, is a lot of tooling has actually been built up over the years for custodians to manage their own funds. So say, you mentioned like a KiwiSaver kind of managed investment. They often have a whole lot of controls and procedures, and they've split things up into multiple keys so that if one executive within that fund passes away, okay, well, we can rotate their key out and we can put somebody new in without having to move all the assets. And that's been kind of best practice for funds for the last 5-6 years.
Yes.
And something I've also been involved in, helping those funds set up those procedures.
Yes. Okay.
So really the trajectory we're on is we've kind of gone from be your own bank, where you're 100% responsible for protecting your key, to be your own fund, where you've got the right keys that you control, but also those of professional key holders in a hybrid fashion so that you can have that redundancy and resilience. If you've got the right professionals that are involved, they'll be looking at what is the security of that transaction. Does that look malicious? Is it going to the right address, or is there a typo there, or is that the right amount?
Yes.
Does that match the instructions that were submitted? So it slows things down, but it also slows it down in a good way because more eyes are looking on it before that transaction is then executed and therefore permanent.
Got it. So one of the things that people can do is they can use a multi-signature or multi-sig wallet. Can you break down for us what that is, what that means?
Yeah, so in the original analogy where you've got your seed phrase or your private key, that's like having a safety deposit box where just one key opens it, right? And then the assets are inside, right? We've got a wallet, if you like, there. Then if you could picture a vault that requires multiple keys to be put in, and at least, say there's 5 keys, at least 3 have to be used to access that vault. So that's the metaphor there for thinking about there being multiple keys to access it and to control the funds there. So that's where the name kind of multi-sig comes from. Sometimes it's also better to think of it as multi-party because you're not going to put all 5 keys with one individual, right? You're going to split that up and have some keys that are for backup, some keys that might be with your lawyer, and therefore you've spread the risk. So when we're talking about people waking up one day and seeing the wallet had been drained from having made some mistake 3-4 years earlier, or having backed up a photo of their seed phrase onto their iCloud, that's no longer an attack vector here because that's only one key out of the 5, or one key out of the 3 that would be needed to actually access and transfer those funds off to, say, the attacker's wallet. So it reduces the risk of one key failure being the kind of concentration point in that security risk.
3 out of 5 keys or 2 out of 3 keys, basically the majority of keys. It's not necessarily just the keys, though. It's about the hands. It's about the parties involved. And one thing just to clarify, if you don't mind, around this is that we know that the wallet basically is holding our private key, and the seed phrase is basically the private key. It's another form of the private key.
Yeah.
When you say that 3 out of 5 keys need to be present to open that vault, most people might think of their wallet as one wallet, one set of seed phrase. What, you talking about 3 seed phrases attached to one wallet? Like, can you just explain how that actually works?
Yeah. So what's happening when we talked about the signature and the integrity of the transaction that is going to the blockchain to actually transfer assets, we've essentially programmed it then with the multi-signature wallet to say one signature is not enough. The same transaction needs to assemble and collate together 3 signatures. And if there are any of these 5 from these 5 addresses that are owners or authorized keys on this wallet, then after that, it'll be accepted by the network.
When this comes down to brass tacks, I guess if there's a wallet, and that might be a hardware wallet, it might be a hot wallet, an application running on a computer, but those are effectively the keys, and they have to combine to create, say, 3 out of 5 on a new wallet.
Yeah, it's kind of this multi-party wallet. So instead of keeping assets in each of those individual 5 keys, you're keeping them in one central place that requires this extra level of security and multiple signatures to then transact.
So those 5 wallets will still have the need to back up your seed phrase somewhere.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So we're still doing that like we normally would, but we're moving one up, aren't we?
Yeah, it's leveling up your security, really. And I do think it will become more and more common. This will be. So while it's tough for some people to have got into crypto in the last 5 years because it was, brass tacks and really understanding these individual pieces, I think people that 5 years from now are coming into crypto will most likely go straight into this level of abstraction.
Because it'll always feel, for people that are just starting out, that you're talking about next level jiggery pokery here, right? Like, this is weird. What are you talking about? Multi-sigs, multi-wallets, 3 out of 5? What?
Yeah, even some people that have been in crypto for a long time, like myself, don't have confidence in multi-signature wallets because they haven't experienced it. So it's kind of the same catch-22.
All right, so now that we've kind of loosely covered the multi-sig piece, can you explain to me what Everlasting is?
Yeah, so Everlasting is a service provider. We are registered as a financial service provider, but we're also just enabling those existing technologies that are there around multi-sig to be accessible to the everyday person. And there's 2 main product offerings that we're offering there. One, which is focused purely on security. So just helping you to level up initially, but to keep, your keys, your assets, level of independence, but just knowing that there's a 3rd key or a backup key with us in case you lose one of them, right?
Correct.
And so that's the entry level kind of product offering there. But then the full suite kind of offering is actually estate management. So taking people who are at that point where they're thinking, hey, if I was hit by a bus, I wouldn't want the stress on my loved ones to have to work out how to access all this crypto, how to then make sure it's handled properly and safely and it is there, or thinking, hey, I want some of that to be held for my children for when they turn 18 or 21 and to be this long-term asset that might continue my legacy for multiple generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you've got that mindset as well, there needs to be more keys and more parties involved. And quite often people, when it's like a new technology like crypto, think, lawyers, they'll never understand it, right? They're always a decade behind. They can't help me. And actually, no, they can and they should. And with the increasing digitization of other systems around us that we use every day, like land records, lawyers are actually becoming more tech savvy than you might assume because they're logging in, they're using
their computer
second
and
factor,
not their fax machine.
Using their computer, but they're also using security devices to do second factor authentication and to securely digitally sign different things in different systems and log things electronically. So when they see a hardware wallet, they're like, oh, right, that's just like the other wallets and other keys that I I use to do my job as a lawyer,
Mm.
to transfer assets. So
Mhm.
it's not as far.
They kind of get it.
Yeah, they kind of get it. The multi-signature wallet setup means that it's actually completely auditable and transparent which keys we used to sign which transactions. And even prior to that, all of the audit trail of instructions that were received from a client and signed and approved before that transaction happened.
Yes.
So that kind of complete product really wraps around in a way that works for individuals and for legal professionals.
Yeah. Okay. We'll come back to that one. So there's two offerings, main two offerings that we're talking about today would be secure and then estate, right?
Yeah, and there's another kind of supporting product which enhances both of those, if you like, where especially in some of the crypto networks, you've got this element of staking. And staking is often a misused kind of term. We have a lot of those in crypto. And when we talk about staking, we're talking about as it exists, say, on the Ethereum network, where it really means running a validator node and getting rewarded for securing the network. And while that might sound, quite onerous and techy, it is something that is approachable to many of our clients, whereby they go, well, if I'm going to be parking this as my long-term assets that I'm likely to give as inheritance to my loved ones, then wouldn't it be nice if there was some passive, not so passive, but kind of earning rewards for securing the network over those years that I might still be alive.
And that's where Everlasting can facilitate with the staking process and maybe provide access to staking services that you might not necessarily be able to access yourself to the same extent. Would that be true?
Yeah, and at the same time, staking is a security function, right? So because we're security professionals, we also can evaluate the risks of different protocols and how to secure not just your assets that are being staked, but also the other keys that are involved in that validating the network process.
Got
So
it. Okay.
that's where that might seem like different products or not in our core competency, but actually it's the same thing. We're just doing it at a different layer.
Yes. Okay. So let's start maybe going back to this security option or the secure option. And this is the one that I've signed up for initially here, and I'll probably move on to the estate one when I grow up and become more responsible. But with this one, this is already a big step for me. So 3 keys, right? So 2 of the 3 keys need to validate and authorize a transaction, correct?
Correct.
And so I have 2 keys, 2 different wallets.
Yep, completely separate, not sharing the same seed phrase.
Yep, ideally completely different protocols, keeping them safe, do the best you can there. I can still carry on as per normal because I have two keys.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. So you're still in full self-custody mode there.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that we have a third key that's acting as a backup is not enough for us to even have part ownership. It's still your crypto. We can't do anything.
You can't do diddly. So really what I'm doing then is I'm ensuring my ability to recover my assets should I lose one of those 2 wallets. So if I lose one wallet, I can go to Everlasting and say, hey friend,
yeah,
can I borrow your key for a second? Hook it up, and then off we go again, and then restore order again so that we have 3 keys, right? That's the idea.
You'll say, here's my new key. And it may even be just part of, like, we're talking about that good security practice of replacing keys, right? And you're like, hey, I just want to replace both my keys because I'm worried that software that I was using or the way that I generated that might not be as safe as I'd like it to be.
Yes.
And so going through those steps to replace first one of them and then replace the other one and make sure that you're getting to the current best practice and best state that can be for securing your assets.
Okay, so a typical thing to do, let's say it's once a year, once every 6 months, or whenever you rebalance your portfolio, whatever the story is.
Yeah.
You could get all the assets off of...
well, you don't have to move the assets.
That's the magic. I was just going, hey, no, wait a minute.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why people have been lazy and sticking with the same address for many years is because the more assets that you've got in that address, you start to go, oh man, it's going to be such a burden, all the transaction fees and everything to move that. Whereas here, because it's a layer higher, the assets stay where they are,
still in
and
that
you're
wallet.
just replacing one of the signing keys.
So it should just be part of the thing that you do regularly and is part of a habit, right? Okay, now that's really cool. And so when we move then to the next model, the estate one, this is where the need is a little bit more important, because with the secure option, I still need to talk to my better half and make sure that he or she knows how to access both those wallets, because really it's still on us.
Yeah,
If we lose both those wallets, there's nothing that Everlasting can do for me.
exactly. And there are some modules and fail-safe type things that you can add on to your secure wallet, but they're not going to solve that end of life scenario in the best way that
Sure.
is possible.
And if you and the other, like, let's say for example, there's husband and wife. The husband and wife have one key each, and those are the two keys out of the threesome there. If they both die mysteriously in a car crash, you're stuffed.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Can't pass it on to the kids.
Okay. So then take me through the estate one then. So with the estate, we have 5 keys. And
Correct.
I would hold 2 still, correct?
Yeah, you're still holding 2. We've also leveled up to have 2 keys, right? And the lawyer holds a 5th key. And the importance of that is now it's a lot harder, right? There still needs to be, now there needs to be 3 signatures, not 2. And to assemble 3 keys, the most likely is going to be your 2 plus one of ours, or 2 of Everlasting's keys and 1 of yours.
Yes.
But if you were, completely out of the picture and we've got the death certificate through from the lawyer, then it's going to be the lawyer as executor of your will, using 1 of their keys and 2 of ours.
Yes. Perhaps a financial advisor holds one of those keys.
Correct.
On behalf of either the client, take one of those 2 keys on, because they still can't do anything on their own.
Yep.
And it's giving you a little bit of confidence that should your partner not be into crypto as much as you, and you don't want to risk it, then you can give it to someone like a financial advisor. Now you have 4 parties.
Yeah.
Still 3 out of 5 required, but you have more choice. You could talk to your lawyer and your financial advisor to authorize a transaction, or you could still go directly to Everlasting to authorize a transaction. It's up to you.
Yeah, and if you've already set up, say, a family trust and you have a professional trustee that's separate from, say, the lawyer that you use in your will, right? They might also be a key holder for you.
Right. Does Everlasting need to, in that scenario, always have 2 keys?
By default, we do. And I think one of the things that we're also needing to be very confident in is that no keys are being lost, right? And so a big part of what we do is also our own key rotation, splitting keys into multi-sig. So you've kind of got your vault analog there, but then it's like as if there's another layer above that's also split into 5, and another layer above that's also split into 5.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. So for our keys, we've spread that geographically around the world to make sure that it would be exceedingly difficult. You kind of get up over 20 different people would need to collude to transfer something. And the same with the law firms that we're working with. We're going, hey, there shouldn't just be one partner in that firm that has this one hardware wallet that they just have full access to, right? What if they pass away? And so we're also helping them with their key management processes to split control over those keys into multiple parts and multiple parties. And then on top of that, we're challenging them. So at least once per year, we'll say, hey, you need to prove that you still have that key, because there's all of these client wallets that depend on you still having that key should any of those clients pass away. And then, hey, twice per year, you should rotate your key, and we'll facilitate that as well.
Gotcha. And because there's these little fail safes that are always there, you're not really let's say you're doing the key rotation chat with the solicitor and someone pushed Control-Alt-Delete just by accident and everything's gone or whatever. Again, it doesn't matter because it's 3 out of 5 that's needed.
Yes.
We'll just reprogram it to replace that key. But it's all about, I guess, consensus and having a group of people together that have to be agreed, or else something doesn't happen.
Exactly. Yep. And it's bringing it back into the control of the people who do need it.
Sure.
And also slowing things down. Like you mentioned at the start, and when we're talking about being your own bank, well, what about under duress? Right.
Mm.
And it's not something that's going to happen to everybody, but there are some people, especially known podcast personalities, that,
What are you saying? Don't put that out there. Come on.
yeah, there have
I've
been
lost all my
cases.
Bitcoin
Oh,
ages
yeah,
ago. Don't worry.
yeah. No, and there have legitimately been cases where it's like somebody's on air or somebody's known to be in a plane, picking that time to try to
Do an
exploit them, and kind of seeing that.
It always happens when Bitcoin Miami's on, it seems. I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah.
That's when everybody's houses gets broken into. No, I'm sure it's not. But that's kind of like the world that we're heading into, where we have to kind of think like that, because like you say before, it might not be a big deal right now when the value of digital assets that the average everyday crypto holder will have might not be significant for the most part.
Yeah.
But should what many of us believe is inevitable happen, you don't want to do the systems in the future. You kind of want to do it now, don't you? Like if you've decided to be a long-term investor, right?
Yes. Yep. And it is also that long-term intention, right? If somebody is still actively trading and, going in and out of crypto on a daily basis, Everlasting's not the provider for you, because we just don't. We intentionally put technical limitations and controls there so that things can't be executed quickly, right? And that's another protection. It's a feature, right? And some people still might split, right? So they might go, okay, 20-30% of my assets I am going to have in my own hot wallets that I control, and I might be more active with that portion. But this 70 or 80%, well, I wasn't going to touch that on a daily or even monthly basis anyway. So I'll just put it there in the most secure setup that I can. If I were to pass away, that 20% might be gone, hey, but at least the bulk of the assets are there.
So like going forward, if we just say, for example, we're now in a world where every asset that we own is somehow represented through a digital asset, like even our house, and we can fractionalize it. Our wealth of every sort, even ourselves, right? Like in our own data, maybe that's
our identity.
An asset. Yeah, our identity for sure. So our assets might take on a much more rounded out definition, right? Like everything could be digitally represented at some stage, and maybe there are crypto assets that provide ownership to those aspects of our lives. And say, for example, our KiwiSaver or our share portfolio, maybe that's actually now just a digital token. So is that possibly what you're preparing for, what you're trying to build out, is a network of custody solution, or you're trying to build out a custody solution that will be fit for purpose for the new world that is soon coming?
Yeah, there's that kind of future state where there are more and more assets that are digitized and stored cryptographically, say on a blockchain. But there's also this in between where we've still got things like YouTube or TikTok accounts that are valuable to people. And when we're talking with lawyers, they're like, oh, it's great you can do the crypto stuff. Can you also do TikTok? Right. And to them, it's kind of like, we've got clients who have been asking, how do I make sure that this valuable account isn't lost, right? And so I think the conversion point of those both, right? We'll think of it broadly as digital assets, whether it's in a tokenized form that you control in your wallet, or it's still, ancient credentials that you might want to secure better than just a password. And so security of logging into your social media accounts and things like that is also trying to leap forward to be controlled more by private keys. And as more and more platforms get comfortable that a private key is a way to access to replace passwords for logging into accounts, then that's going to need the same kind of approach to securing it.
This to me feels like this will be very much the normal thing to do, in light of what you just said, especially like pretty much everything. Do you see that banks will move into this space? Like who would be your competitor in the future?
Well, banks, I've actually been saying as far back as 5 years ago, are in a really strong position, because when we talk about like a hardware wallet being this little device that we plug into, say, a laptop to sign a transaction, The technical name for that is a HSM, or a hardware security module.
Okay.
And that's just an industry security term for a piece of hardware that can securely generate keys
Right.
and make sure that there's no way to extract the key off of that piece of hardware.
Right. So I call it a dumb USB. You call it an HSM.
It still is at the dumb USB end of the scale. What the banks have in their data centers is these wonderful black boxes that manage tens of thousands of keys, be that for your debit card or your credit card, or even your passwords that you're entering in on to log into internet banking. What's checking that against the source is going back to an HSM that is actually, matching. Great, that is the correct password. Or when you put the PIN number in to approve a debit card transaction, that's going to an HSM. So in behind a lot of banking already are these hardware security modules, and banks can do them at scale. So they could issue everybody, private keys. They could do crypto incredibly well, except you would need to be sure that they aren't then the only key holder, right? That they can't transfer your assets without you. And so
really they could be one of the 5 potentially in the
yeah,
future.
absolutely.
So they're custodying one of the keys.
Exactly. They've already invested in all this hardware. They've already got the security teams. They know how to secure a data center. So yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
If I was to look forward 5 years, I do think they are more active in there. Selfishly, that's because they've also issued stable coins or digital assets themselves, and that's how they kind of have some fee or revenue mechanism to monetize them fulfilling that role. They're not going to do it for free, but I do think they start to become a part of that, along with individuals having their own keys as a multi-sig type of arrangement.
So thinking about central bank issued digital currencies, which is pretty much an inevitability in my view, when that happens, that's going to need to be custodied somewhere as well. So presumably we'll be holding it in our digital wallets of some sort.
Yeah, and that's unlikely to be a government-issued digital wallet, right?
Doesn't make sense.
That would be weird.
Yeah.
RBNZ and Treasury Department, they don't have a lot of experience with HSMs like the banks do, right? So they'll be going, okay, there are banks or bank-like entities that have the expertise to store keys on behalf of customers and do so in a way that is, really verifiable and correct. And so I do think we'll get some bank-issued wallets or some wallets that are a consortium across banks. There's been a few failed attempts at doing that in the past. And so not everyone also wants to trust a consortium of banks to fill that role. And so there'll be the independent third-party options as well, like an Everlasting or other wallets that are yet to be created. And that will just be the norm for people, is knowing that, great, there's a multi-party or multi-signature vault that is storing my assets.
It makes sense, because we've got to find a job for the banks to do in the future.
So
I'm sure they've thought this through, though, Paul. I'm sure they've thought this through.
I think there's people operationally who think it through, but when you get up to the board level, it really does come around, how do we monetize that? How do we actually, will we get enough revenue to justify launching that product? And some of the Australian banks are getting that across the board level to at least pilot things, but I think that's still 4 or 5 years away. And in the meantime, third-party independent solutions will cater
thrive
to the need.
Yeah, totally agree. So on the topic of revenue then, what is the revenue model for Everlasting?
Yeah, so for those 2 primary products, a upfront fee for the setup and advising you how to get either into secure estate, and then just an annual fee that is there in a dollar amount, so that great, I can forecast for that. And then for the kind of staking add-on, if you like, that you can add on to either secure estate, like most staking services, that's just a small portion of the rewards that you receive for validating the network. And that's actually a nice win-win, right? So we've got some additional ongoing trickle of revenue for helping you to secure your assets, but the bulk of that upside is there for your long-term savings.
The secure option, or with the estate one, there's going to be a nominal upfront fee and then an annual fee to provide that service. But if you bolt on the staking service, there's basically a revenue share model that's going on. Is that right?
Yeah, the fees are just deducted from those rewards.
Cool.
And that's actually what I'm most excited about, because I could go on hundreds of podcasts and talk about security and how seed phrases aren't a really good solution, and all of the things that can go wrong. But what most people are actually coming to us for is, I'd like to have some long-term sustainable, validator rewards to grow my wealth over time. And I understand if I do that with Everlasting, then I also get security and I get this estate plan. Is that right? And it's like, yes, that's win-win. That's the carrot, rather than coming with the stick of like, you're not, doing seed phrase management very well. That's not going to onboard customers.
No, it's just going to make people feel pretty stink about themselves.
Yeah.
And that's like really in line again with a long-term view of holding these assets. Like, I kind of feel from a tax point of view, it should be like any other asset, rather than have a carve out and a special tax law. Like, I think we should be taxed on the revenue, and therefore we should be capital gains exempt for life, right? Because our goal is not to speculate, as long as you can establish that is what you've set out to do. And if you were using a service like Everlasting, I guess that would be a little bit more believable as well.
And that is something we're talking with Inland Revenue about, and we're very optimistic we'll have a nice package that has that kind of stamp from Inland Revenue, as well as our auditors at EY, to be able to say, this is the tax treatment of the assets that you have with Everlasting. That's not out yet, but it will be within 2023, and that will make it really clear, because as well, we don't want to be out there going, great, here's a way to trick Inland Revenue, or we want it to be, here's what tax you owe on which way based on your needs, where only a service provider reporting it to you. It's then you as the taxable individual that then pays the tax accordingly, right?
Got it. Okay. With what you guys are doing at Everlasting, does it actually help with institutional flows of capital into the crypto ecosystem? Will it make it easier?
It can do. So in some ways it's competing, right? Because they're quite happy using some North American custodian like a BlackRock or a Fidelity that has a significant amount of Bitcoin under their keys. And they just go, okay, well, I don't need to worry about key management. I'll outsource that, if you like, to another custodian. And that's how at least the larger institutional funds have been offering crypto to their customers. But on the other side of the same coin, they can realize a greater revenue as being managers of crypto asset funds if they do take on some of those responsibilities. If they are actually holding keys, they're not giving up as much of the basis points of profit to offshore into multinationals, right? And so it is an enabler, and the same technology and approaches can enable them to do it. Then there's if you are a, say, Everlasting client and you are thinking, okay, I want a wealth type approach and I want to bring in together a, say, wealth manager that I already have other assets with, and I want to make them a part of this. They might be one of your 5 keys, or they might be a 6th key, and they can then still give you that access and advice or other things that they are good at, because we'll never give you financial advice, and we'll give you general security advice, not necessarily personalized to your needs. But for a lot of people, they're going, actually, could somebody analyze the market and help me to rebalance my portfolio?
Yeah. Okay. That's quite cool. Because I guess, if you have a key, you have access to all the information. Therefore, you could actually even just be a reporting service.
Yeah. So we can even permission those keys. We can create a sub vault, if you like. That's the managed assets vault. And that's a product we're looking at launching later this year, which will be a wealth product. That means that a permissioned key that's, say, with a wealth manager can actually rebalance your portfolio of assets in that without ever being able to withdraw them. And basically fitting under the same security umbrella of your long-term
I see.
assets.
Right. So let's say, for example, you have a very small sliver of your overall big portfolio, but you carve off just say 10% of it and you put it in this sub wallet. And that sub wallet is attached to that other key, but nothing else, so that they can go in there and just do the rebalancing
Yeah,
on that small portion. Right.
correct.
Okay. Well, that's blows me away, actually. So there's lots of really cool things. Okay, so like there is probably so much more that I could ask you, Paul. I can guarantee you that there's so much more. Uh, I know that there will be people that do hold crypto assets themselves and have been handling the security reasonably well, certainly by my standards. And I've seen various levels of care taken with how seed phrases are taken care of. What would you recommend if someone was listening in and they wanted to take the next step? What would be the most logical next step to take if they just wanted to kind of scope out Everlasting a little bit more, or find out a little bit more, interact maybe, but not commit to the process? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there is absolutely no harm in talking to us. We're always
Mm.
happy to share information and share more about the tools that we're using as well. Because
Mm.
for a lot of people, again, they want to experience what it is like to use a multi-sig. And so you don't have to onboard with us to use a multi-sig, but we can also explain what are the ones that we use and how do they fit into the picture. And you might start off with just setting that up and getting comfortable with it
Mhm.
yourself before, say, onboarding with Everlasting and taking it further.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned a couple of times just during this episode, of it's that mental shift to how do I go to that next level, and we're happy to educate and help people on that journey.
Yeah, fantastic. So, website, what is it?
Everlasting.io for the website, or everlasting.nz for our local audience. And yeah, we're trying to put together more of a hub of information. So that's coming in the next update to the website, where people can just watch videos around
Great.
using multi-sigs and some
Great.
of the basic 102
Yeah,
level
that's right.
of
Yeah.
content
So I think
there.
it is one of those things where you kind of have to soak in this for just a
Mm,
little bit, because I know people listening that might have a rough understanding on it. They're probably benefiting from what they've just heard. But those that are still like, whoa, what's Bitcoin again? What's Ethereum? What? There's more than one? Like if you're
yeah,
at that state, that's cool. Everyone starts somewhere, but it probably would take some time to understand and appreciate what it is that we're talking about here and why it's so important. I think what you guys are doing is awesome, and I wish you all the best with the business. Hopefully, it goes well.
thanks, Darcy. It's been
Cool.
a great conversation.
Awesome. Cheers.